So I've been dealing with a super frustrating situation. So apparently there was a glitch that was happening with a plan I was subscribed to. And I don't want to go into like a huge amount of details because I don't want to waste your time. And there's a little irony in that comment too. So hang tight and you'll get it soon. But the gist of the situation is that a few months ago, I found myself in sort of a loop, contacting an organization about being dropped from a plan. And instead of them solving the problem, right, they gave me a number to contact for another organization who was responsible. Then I called that organization and the number that they gave me. And when they couldn't fix the problem, they would send me back to the original phone number I called when the whole shenanigans began. So anyway, I ended up in an infinite loop of just pure frustration. And all I wanted was to just be subscribed to my plan, just like every other regular customer, right? And I wanted to go about my life without that headache. And this went on for weeks. And I would even argue it's probably still going on because I'm having to watch my account every day to make sure I'm still subscribed, right? But anyway, I have the call logs and I've logged somewhere around like 20 plus hours across just 2 weeks. That doesn't include all the other hours I spent. This was just on the phone too. And it didn't get resolved until I physically walked into an office and stood in front of a real person. But somewhere I would say around hour 12, like I was a lot of hours into this and I started thinking, this isn't just bad service. This is a brand telling me exactly who they are. Because here's the thing, every interaction you have with a customer is communicating something. And the ones that involve time, those might be the most honest signals a brand sends because they're really hard to fake. And that's what this video is about. So there's a field of study that's called chronemics. And before your eyes glaze over, I promise this is more interesting than it sounds. So chronemics is a study of how time functions as communication. And basically the idea that the pace of an interaction, like how fast you respond, how long you make someone wait, or how much room you give someone to think or talk, that speed and timing is sending a message about who you are and what you value, even when you're not aware of it. So think about the people who interrupt you mid-sentence, right? We've all encountered someone like that. And sometimes they don't mean to, but we all make assumptions about those behaviors that they're maybe not really listening to us, or what they have to say matters more than what we're saying. Or maybe it's just that the conversation is really just waiting for their turn. Now think about the brand that sends you an email, literally like minutes after you've been browsing on their website, right? Or the ad that shows up right after you were having a conversation with someone about that product, right? We make assumptions about those businesses and brands as well. And it's kind of the same feeling. It might feel slightly intrusive, maybe even a little creepy. And the timing of those things, honestly, feels a little rude and disrespectful. But none of those businesses probably sat down and said, this is how we want our customers to feel. But that's exactly how we feel, right? And that's chronemics in practice. Time isn't neutral, actually. Every choice a brand makes about the pace and timing is sending a signal. And your customers are reading it whether you intended to or not. So if time is a brand signal, let's talk about that so you can understand it a little better. Because it's not about just the clock, right? There's a researcher named David Maister, or it could be Maister. We'll call him Maister. But he studied the psychology of waiting lines back in the 80s. And what he found was pretty interesting and a little counterintuitive when you really think about it. But the actual length of a wait matters less than how that wait is handled. So unexplained waiting feels longer than explained ones, right? If you're sitting there with no context, your brain starts filling in the gaps and it usually fills it in with frustration, right? But if someone says, hey, we're currently looking into this, it's taking a little longer than expected, that one sentence actually matters a lot. That one sentence does a lot of work. the experience is completely different. That information changes how you feel about the time. What Maister was really getting at is that uncertainty is the thing that breaks the experience, not the wait itself. And this connects to something I think a lot about in the context of small business, because there's also a Harvard Business School study that kind of surprised me when I came across it. So in this study, researchers set up an experiment in a university cafeteria, and they created a video link between the kitchen and the serving area so that customers could see cooks working in the kitchen while they waited for their food. So nothing about the food actually changed. It was all the same recipes, same ingredients, and the same staff. The only difference was the visibility to the kitchen and the cooks. And here's what happened. Customer satisfaction went up significantly just from being able to see the effort. And when the cooks could see the customers too, it went up even more. So the quality of the food actually improved, not because someone told them to make better food or to do better, but because that connection changed something. So that's not just a service insight, that's a brand insight. And small businesses have access to that kind of transparency in a way that large corporations and companies just genuinely don't. You can show your progress. You can let people in on how something gets made or handled or maybe thought through. And a lot of small businesses aren't doing that, not because they don't have anything worth showing, but because they don't realize it matters. And this is where it gets interesting, because the brands that figured this out didn't do it with a bigger budget or a better marketing team, right? They just made a different choice about how they showed up, right? And that's what I want to get into next. This is essentially what's known as slow marketing. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice, because I want to be clear about something. Slow marketing doesn't mean taking 3 days to respond, right, to an inquiry, or letting things fall through the cracks and calling that intentional. No, it means being deliberate about your pace, knowing when speed communicates respect and when slowness communicates more care and thoughtfulness. There are two kinds of moments in a customer relationship. There's utility moments and there's relationship moments, and they require completely different responses. So utility moments are more of the functional ones, right? Someone fills out your contact form, someone has a problem with an order, someone lands on your website, right? And it takes forever to load. These are the moments where speed signals competence, right? Where being slow actually costs you trust, not builds it. So research out of Harvard Business Review found that companies responding to an initial inquiry within 5 minutes were dramatically more likely to connect with that potential customer than those who waited even 30 minutes, right? That's an example of a utility moment where speed is the signal, and it's a good one. So relationship moments, on the other hand, are different, right? These are the moments where you're following up after a sales conversation, right? Where you're deciding how often to show up in someone's inbox, right? In the emails, where a customer is deciding whether they trust you enough to buy, right? Rushing these moments, right? Pushing for the decision before the relationship is ready. That's where a lot of businesses accidentally undermine themselves. They interpret silence from these leads as disinterest and respond by turning up the volume of the speed, right? And pressure tactics. When actually giving someone room to decide is one of the most respectful things a brand can do. And I talk a little bit about this in my ethical marketing video, which I'll link to that somewhere here. There are currently brands out there that understand this distinction. So Darn Tough is a sock company out of Vermont. And I actually personally own quite a few pairs of Darn Tough socks because they're some of my favorite socks ever. And I know you probably don't want to hear about my stinky socks, but stay with me. They offer an unconditional lifetime guarantee on every pair of socks they make. For any reason, anytime, even if they're stinky, replaced for free. But guess what? They didn't build their business through aggressive marketing campaigns or urgency tactics, right? They grew almost entirely through word of mouth, through the hiking communities, through military forums, people who'd worn the same pair of socks for years and couldn't stop talking about them. So the guarantee itself became the marketing because it signals something. It says, we're not in a hurry. We're here for the long relationship, not the quick sale, right? YETI is another brand, and most people know YETI now. But what you might not know is that for the first 8 years or so, almost nobody knew them. They didn't launch with a big advertising push. They dropped their products with fishing guides and hunting outfitters and barbecue pitmasters, right? People who would actually use their products and use them hard, right? And talk about them honestly. They made short documentary films about those communities, not about the products, right? About the people using the products. And it took years before YETI actually reached mainstream awareness. And I'd argue that patience is a big part of why that brand means what it means today. You can't manufacture that kind of credibility. It builds at its own pace, right, in time. And the term for this approach, again, that's slow marketing. The idea that building a durable brand relationship requires a different rhythm than chasing a quick conversion. Some of the valuable brand signals you can send are the ones that don't actually feel like marketing, right? But what I want to focus on here is the choice that's actually available to small businesses specifically, because you have something that large brands are spending enormous amounts of money trying to replicate, and that's the ability to operate at a human pace, to actually know your customers, to slow down in the moments that matter without it being a liability, right? That's not a limitation. It's a structural advantage for small businesses. Now, I want to be honest about something here because this is where the idea of slow marketing can get a little slippery, right? Because there's a difference between being intentionally slow and just being slow, right? It's not okay to not follow up at all. Or to let inquiries sit for days in your inbox. It doesn't help your brand to respond to emails whenever you get around to it, right? And then wonder why people aren't converting. That's not slow marketing. That's just disorganized. That's just disorganized. And customers will notice that difference too. So the version of slow that actually builds trust is deliberate. You're fast where it matters. The initial response, the acknowledgement, the moment where someone needs to know that they've been heard. And then you're slow in the places where rushing would actually work against you. So think about it from the customer's side. If you reach out to a small business and don't hear back for 4 days, right? You've already moved on. You've found someone else or you've talked yourself out of the purchase entirely, right? So speed at that moment isn't pressure. It's just respect. But if that same business follows up with that initial response with 3 emails in 2 days, pushing you toward a decision, that's a different signal entirely. So now you're feeling pressured rather than valued, right? The question worth asking in your own business is pretty simple. Where are you slow because you chose to be? And where are you slow because things are falling through the cracks? One of those is a brand strategy, and the other one is something that needs to be fixed stat, right? So I go back to thinking about that moment when I finally walked into that office, when I was struggling to get my problem fixed with my subscription. And after weeks of phone calls, felt like an infinite number of times, the thing that resolved the problem was getting in front of a real person. There's something that happens in a face-to-face interaction that a phone system or an automated response can't replicate. Someone looks at you, right? They take ownership. The passing of the buck stops because there's nowhere left to pass it on. Right? And you just called them out in person. That's what accountability looks like. And it's also what a lot of customers are quietly looking for from the brands that they choose to spend money with. They don't always expect perfection, just someone who's actually there and who will actually listen to them. So I don't believe most businesses are intentionally making their customers feel like their time doesn't matter, but that experience is what people remember and what they talk about and what eventually determines whether they come back. So if there's something worth taking from all of this, it's probably just worth looking at your own business and asking where your customer's time is going. Take an honest look. Where are they waiting without knowing why? Where are they being passed around? And where is the pace of your communication sending a signal you didn't mean to send? Because your brand is telling people who you are in those moments, whether you meant it to or not. What do you think about slow marketing? Are you implementing slow marketing in your own business? I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for taking the time and a few moments to spend with me. I really appreciate you. Anyway, until the next one, have a beautiful day.